morning. Or if you're tuning in a little bit later and you're not necessarily live with us right now, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you might be right now, I take great comfort in this, by the way, whether we're scattered about in our homes, whether you're in a car, whether you're in the backyard, whether you're dad and you're in the bathroom watching this on a cell phone, wherever you might be, and I mean this sincerely, it's so good to be together today. And I hope that resonates with you. There's something really beautiful about the fact that we get to gather in this way, even in an online presence type of a thing, all of us together. And I want you to know, even here this morning as you tune in, let that sit with you for just a second. Friends, you are not alone. Even if you're sitting by yourself in your house, even in this particular moment, you're not alone. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. It's good to be with you here this morning. You know, the moment that we decided to no longer have in-person services as we're navigating COVID-19 here, one of the chief questions that we as leaders have been asking is, okay, if we can't gather everybody here, how do we do a really good job? How do we think through, how do we process meeting people where they are in all of this? Because we need that, don't we? I need that. I know you do. Somebody to meet us in that place. So even using our services and our messages to do that. So I've been thinking a lot about that this past week. How do we meet people? What would meet you even right now? And the truth is, for me, something that's been resonating and encouraging me so much this last week is one particular passage in the Gospel of John. It's in John chapter 10. And so I want to share that with you this morning in hopes that it meets you right where you're at. And it's this: I am the good shepherd. This is Jesus speaking, by the way, as John writes this. It says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. See, this encourages me in a really deep way right now, and I hope it does the same for you. Because I don't know if you've noticed if your life is like mine right now, I look around me and there's this thing, I'm seeing people around me making decisions and choices and stuff, and it seems like so many of us have almost kind of like reduced ourselves to this Darwinistic survival of the fittest way of thinking, right? Like some of the mantras that you might describe that with would be, go and get what's yours before everybody else takes it and you have nothing left, right? Or protect yourself from everybody else. See everything and everyone, the world around you, all of it as a threat. You're not okay, and you know, you need to put everybody else at bay. Or maybe it's go get what you need and then take more, because you know, you never know if you're gonna run out, and if you don't take what's yours, who's gonna look out for you? There's this kind of like mantra messaging that people are living out of, whether we're saying it out loud or not. And then I find myself looking around at times at leaders around us making decisions, and politicians and people trying to navigate this forward, making large decisions. And I don't know about you, I have a hard time sometimes discerning or trusting whether the decisions that are always being made are in like serving political interests, or whether they're in the best interest of meeting people right where they're at as we're navigating this really complicated time. It's all kind of complicated and confusing in these different moments. And that's why when I read this passage from John and I hear these words of Jesus, it's so incredibly resonant. It's so incredibly comforting to me in this moment. He tells us he is the good shepherd, and that the good shepherd lays his life down for his sheep. I can trust that. You know, the truth of the matter, Jesus, as your good shepherd, isn't trying to get something from you. He's trying to bring something to you, even right here and right now. Jesus isn't trying to protect himself and leave you unprotected. Jesus lays his life down on our behalf that each of us might have life and have it to the full, even amidst these complicated and unique circumstances that we're walking through right now. The truth of the matter is, he is the good shepherd. He was, he is, and always will be. Christ is the good shepherd. And friends, that is good news for me, for you, for us all here this morning. And I hope that resonates with you. Let that soak in for just a moment. You know, a little while later, in John chapter 10, verse 27 comes about. Jesus is still talking about himself being the good shepherd, and he says these words. He says, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. So I want to just spend the rest of our time here this morning looking at this particular verse, just this one verse. And I know it's small, but there's so much in it for us here today. And what I want to do for that is I'm going to point to 2 points that I see in this verse, and then one final challenge for us all, for you, for me, for us all. My hope is that this week, as you navigate the unknowns and the complexity and all that lies before you, the good, the bad, the beautiful, all of it that's there, that each of us would come to find ourselves resting in he who is the good shepherd and tuning into that powerful, that beautiful voice of Christ. And so that brings me to the first point here this morning, and it's this: listen to the voice of Christ in you. Listen to the voice of Christ in you. Think about it. Verse 27, what's Jesus say? He says, my sheep hear my voice. Some of this, if I'm honest, can get lost on me because I didn't grow up around shepherds. I didn't grow up around a lot of sheep. I don't know that I've ever met like a real life shepherd in person in my life. And so some of this can get lost on me. And yet there was a few years ago, I found myself in Scotland journeying through and hiking around and exploring in an area where there was actually more sheep than people, just randomly everywhere. I mean, you had to like drive carefully or you were going to hit one and that was going to end really poorly for you and everybody else. And so there's these sheep all around. We would be hiking out in the middle of nowhere, exploring around, and you'd look on a hill and there on the top of that hill would just be like a random sheep. And then you'd look and over on another hill, there'd be two over there. At times, we would be looking at like some rock precipice that looked like a dangerous place to be. And there up on top of the thing would just be some random sheep. And I would find myself looking around in these different moments, wondering, whose are they? Like, who do these belong? Like, surely there's not just like wild roaming sheep. Who do they belong to? How did they get there? Does anybody know about this? Are they going to be okay? Are they going to make their way back home? Because it just seems like everybody was scattered about. And then what I came to learn is that sheep really attune to the voice of their shepherd. You see, every shepherd has a unique call. And it's both the call itself and the voice, that shepherd's own unique voice, that sheep over time begin to build this relationship of trust with that shepherd to the degree that if the shepherd walks out, whoever those sheep all belong to, and calls them, that unique call and that unique voice, the sheep prick their ears up and they tune in, and from wherever they might be, they come to where the shepherd is calling them from. It's really powerful. You know what's more interesting though, is if you or I were to go, and I tried, and try to like call the sheep or to move the sheep or to get sheep to do basically anything that you wanted them to do, and you were to try to mimic what the shepherd might say or say something like that same thing, the sheep would immediately know that it wasn't their shepherd's voice and what you were saying would fall on deaf ears. They just sit there staring at you with those big hollow sheep eyes. I might have had a few experiences with these sheep in my path or in a way, trying to move them, and they're stubborn. They are in tune with the shepherd's voice. This is what I think Jesus is getting at in such a beautiful way when he says, the sheep hear my voice. It's this picture, this tuning in, being attuned to the shepherd's voice. You know, several years ago, I was in a wedding. I was a groomsman. And in one particular night, me and some of the other groomsmen were hanging out, and one of the groomsmen started telling a story. And it's a story that stuck with me that I remember to this day. And I'll probably remember my whole life, and I'll share it with you now because I think it's relevant here today. We're sitting there, and he talks about the night he graduated from high school. And they had this large party. They were all from Michigan, and so all this took place in Michigan. They had this huge party out in the middle of the woods where there was this big bonfire. And everybody was gathered around. There was a lot of students who'd graduated. There was a lot of underage drinking that was happening at this particular party at that point in time, and they're all hanging out. And at one point in time, this guy says that all of a sudden they heard this yelling sound, and this guy in a white hat comes sprinting up. He comes sprinting through where everybody is gathered, and he's yelling, "The police are here. The cops have arrived. Like, everybody run!" And he just keeps on running and runs off into the distance. Like just runs off into the darkness of the forest. All of these underage students, many of whom have been drinking, are suddenly afraid that they're going to get caught up in the law, that something's bad, that they broke the law, something's going to happen, or they're going to be associated with something, or they're just caught up in the swirl of the moment, and they all get up and they start yelling and freaking out, and they go running. I don't know if you've ever been, at a campfire. When you've really got a fire going, you look and all you can see because of the reflection of the fire is kind of that first row of trees around you. That's all illuminated, but beyond that row, it's just kind of like the abyss. It's like the darkness beyond the trees. This gentleman and all of these students with him go running off into that darkness. My friend described running as he's sprinting through this, and he said he was yelling, and then the next thing he knows, he wakes up. And he doesn't wake up from a dream in his bed. He wakes up in the darkness, and his ribs are bruised, and he's hurting, and he's disheveled and trying to figure out where he is. And lo and behold, he's in a tree. His body like laying in a tree, landed in a tree somehow. And he looked and he'd gotten a watch, a brand new watch for graduation, and noticed that the watch had fallen off. And so he's trying to find it, and he lowers himself out of the tree, trying to get his bearings, trying to find his watch, and he begins crawling upon the ground. And he sees somebody he recognizes, this girl from his school. She's crawling on the ground too, looking for something. And he says, "Have you seen my watch?" And she looks up at him, and there's literally blood on her face as she says, "Have you seen my teeth?" And for the first moment, he recognizes that she's actually missing her 2 front teeth and is bruised and battered, and it's crazy, friends. So I know that story got real dark, real fast, and many of you are probably confused. What happened? Well, here's what happened. They were all having this party at a place called the Ledges. It's this place in Michigan where they all lived, and they all knew it. They knew that the place they were having a party at just beyond in the darkness was the Ledges. They'd all been there. They'd all understood this. And that over just a little ways off was a ledge that you could fall off, like a cliff, if you will. And yet despite that, in that moment, when the guy in the white hat comes running through and says, "Everybody run," fear took over. And all of a sudden their wise minds and their full hearts shrink down, and fear occupies their very spirit. And they go blitzing off into the darkness in front of them, many falling off the ledge themselves. And people were bruised and battered. This is an awful thing. You're like, I know, it's an awful thing. Why are you sharing this with us? Here's why. It's because it's incredibly relevant for where we are today. You see, friends, in your life, right here and right now and in the weeks to come, the voice that you listen to actually matters. In your life, the voice you listen to really, really matters. It does. You listen to the right voice, and you may find that it continues to lead you towards more and more life, towards peace and goodness. Even amidst hardship and complexity and circumstances and unknowns, there's still a life to be had. The right voice can lead you a long way in that direction. But the wrong voice, listening to the wrong voice, can suddenly tune into all kinds of fears. You find it taking over you, and suddenly your world shrinks and your wise mind shrinks, and you go running off into whatever darkness is in front of you, awaiting whatever ledge there is, whatever pitfall there is in front of us. Friends, the voice we listen to really, really matters. And that's why it's so good that Jesus says he is the good shepherd and that the sheep know his voice. Friends, the good shepherd, even now, speaks love over you, over me, over us all. I want you to know that. The good shepherd even now speaks love over you, calls you to rest and to reside in his grace and in his mercy and in his compassion. And even now, amidst the complexity of the circumstances that we walk in, leads us towards life. Not that we might jump out of this moment, but even in this moment, that there might be life to be had as we listen to the voice of the good shepherd. He's our good shepherd even still. And so I have to ask you this morning, want to ask you, just pause for just a second. In your life, with where you are right here and right now, whose voice are you listening to? I mean, think about that for just a moment. In your life, where you are right here and right now, whose voice are you listening to? Maybe for you, the voice that's the loudest is the voice of fear, and it's the one that you've begun to listen to the most. You know, for so many of us right now, I think that probably is the loudest voice. And I'll even say rightfully so, because the reality is there are threats to our well-being. There's threats to health. There's threats to financial stability and security, and threat of loss that are actually happening around us, even at this moment, and with us, right, in our own lives. It's a real thing. And yet for some of us, that voice has become so loud that it's not just that we now feel confined to our own homes. For some of us, we actually feel trapped between the walls of fear. It's the loudest thing that we hear. You know, the interesting thing is this. The reason, we've talked about this at this church at Casas before, the reason we fear is because there's something beautiful that we want to protect. The reason we fear is because there's something in our life that we hold dear and want to value and experience and protect. And so we have to also consider that we need to be careful to not actually let those fears rob us of experiencing the good of life itself. That voice can get so loud that suddenly everything else quiets in the background. Friends, healthy fear can protect you from all kinds of things. But unchecked fear can actually rob you of the very life that you so desire to live. It can be deafening. And I know that's where some of us are at right now. I find myself in various moments where that just starts to happen. Maybe that's the voice you hear. Or maybe for you, that voice is the voice of lack. Maybe for you, the thing that you hear is this voice inside of you that's constantly saying, what if I can't do this right now? What if I'm not enough? What if I don't make it through? What if I don't have the ability to make the right decisions? Or what if with the people I love and care about, I somehow hurt them or I let them down or something happens through this? And all of that pressure and all of that felt sense of what if I just can't starts to build up inside of you. If that's you, you've probably found yourself at some point in time, even with the people you love, getting in arguments and fights because you're starting to resent them for the pressure you feel. And it's hard to carry that. The truth is, we don't always know how to process that or feel our way through it when that voice gets really loud inside of us. And for some of us, I think maybe the voice we're listening to is the voice of comparison. I know this week with school being canceled, like officially through the year, right? In-person school and shifting to online. Some of you have probably looked on social media or talked with different people, and there's that one parent that's out there that somehow is able to educate their kids, make dinner, work a full-time job, and do a whole bunch of other stuff on top of that, and you find yourself just barely making it through this or really struggling with where you're at, and that comparison moment starts to happen, and it becomes deafening and inside of you. Is who you are, and the wise mind you have, and the beautiful heart that God's created you with begins to shrink. Friends, whatever that voice is that you're listening to, can you just be honest for just a moment and ask yourself the question, what voice is it? Because right here and right now, the Good Shepherd still speaks. Amidst all the noise of COVID-19, amidst all the uncertainties that we face, amidst all the tensions and things that we carry, all that deafening sound around us, the Good Shepherd speaks even still. And he says beautiful things to us like, I lay my life down for the sheep. You can trust me. Follow me. He says beautiful things like, even still, they will know how much I love you by the way that you love one another. And he says, just as I care for the flowers of the field and the birds of the air, how much more then do I care for you right here and right now? And he says beautiful things about how he'll never leave us nor forsake us. The Good Shepherd speaks even still. Will you let it reach you? Will you tune your heart and your ears into that beautiful voice that's been speaking this entire time, that it might find its way through the noise around you and meet you right where you are? It's a powerful thing, friends. He's our Good Shepherd. That brings me to the second point here this morning, and it's this. God knows where you are right now. And I mean this not generally, not collectively. I mean this personally to you specifically, to me, to each of us. God knows where you really are right here and right now. Jesus says, my sheep hear my voice, and then he says, and I know them. The word that gets used to describe how Christ knows the sheep is a word that means more than just he understands that a little bit, or it's a word that's more than just he's aware of it, or he knows that information, or he's aware, he's got it. It's a word that means he actually understands what it's like to be them. He actually understands who they are and where they are and how they are. God is speaking in this way to say he knows you right now where you're at. And that's a really big deal for me, even, especially at this juncture in time. Maybe you're like me, maybe you've recognized this too. I found myself in this season of life, I don't have any shortage of people that are around me right now that are, short on advice. I don't. I'm surrounded by so many people that have thoughts and opinions about absolutely everything about how to live life, how to engage, what to do, what not to do, what to think, what not to think, what's ridiculous and what's not, what should be done, all of this stuff. And there's so much thought and advice being spoken around me. And I find myself at times, feeling like a little shut off to some of it. And sometimes I feel like it's not connecting in some way. And I find myself asking, what's wrong? Am I stubborn? Something happening? And then it occurred to me that, the truth is it's really hard to listen to a voice that doesn't really understand where you are and what you're really going through, isn't it? It's hard to listen to that voice. I mean, think of this. How many of you right now are even experiencing this in your own homes? The truth is you're in your home with maybe people you love, or you're somehow connected to people that care about you or that you care about right now. And yet you find yourself in this place where we're all experiencing the same collective moment called COVID-19. We're all experiencing economic worry. We're all experiencing health concerns. We're all experiencing the same kind of generalized understanding. And yet as each of us walk through it, so many of us are experiencing it so differently, the same thing, but so differently. And it's impacting us in different ways. In your own home, how many times has somebody given you advice or said something to you and you walked away feeling unseen? Like they didn't get you in that particular moment. How many times have you interacted with somebody and they've shared with you or they've heard you and yet you walked away and felt like they missed you somehow? Like for whatever reason, you were close, 6 feet apart, but it was like a mile apart in that particular moment. Like they didn't see you. It's hard to listen to a voice that doesn't really understand where you're at and who you are right now, isn't it? That's why I love it when Christ says, my sheep know my voice and I know them. Friends, he knows where you are right here and right now. And I want you to hear this because I think some of you are probably sitting in your houses, wherever you might be, in your cars, listening to this, hearing this, watching this. And the truth is that through all of this, you've had people around you, but you feel alone. He knows you. He knows where you are, and he knows what you're going through, and as close as he could possibly be, even right here and right now. Will you let that for just a moment here today reach you? Will you let it meet you where you're at in this powerful way? He knows you. And that brings me to the challenge for this morning, the last thing here this morning as we move through this. And it's this: follow the voice that leads you toward life. Follow the voice that leads you towards life, right? Jesus said, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. And then in the next verse, he talks about where he leads them and what he gives them. He says, and I give them eternal life, and nobody's going to come snatch them out of my hand in this. This is the gift that I have. He says that even now, amidst these circumstances, the gift that the Good Shepherd has for each of us, when it says eternal life, this isn't just a someday. Eternal life flows in both directions. He's literally saying, I come to give them life in their here and in their now, forever and always. Like a wellspring of love flowing within your heart, pouring out of you, regardless of your circumstances, regardless of what it is we're facing, that there's some kind of life to be had, some goodness to behold in Christ right here and even right now. And I recognize, because even for me, if somebody had said that to me this week, I'd go, really? Because it's been a tough week. And there's a part of it where at moments, if somebody's saying, yeah, there's life to be had, I'd be like, yeah, but can I just have a moment where there's not life because I've lost some things or I've struggled with some things or there's some fear, there's some tensions or worries or hardships that I'm facing right now. And I get that and don't seek to minimize that at all. It's being met in the midst of that. There's something still powerful about that. That's why I wanted to share an excerpt from Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, here this morning. Frankl was this amazing man who studied and thought and wrote at great length about just what it means to be a human and the power that exists in us in this life and what that looks like. And he writes many of that from the reflections of his own survival in a concentration camp during World War II, which is a crazy atrocity that he had to navigate through. And so I want to read this section with you today. If when people read things, you find yourself starting to distance or starting to tune out or look around, don't. This is rich. And even if it's hard to follow at a certain moment, stay with it because there's something really beautiful here learned from this man's experience. So let me read it. It says, Frankl's words, we who lived in concentration camps can remember the men who walked through the huts comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's way. And there were always choices to make. Every day, every hour offered the opportunity to make a decision which determined whether you would or would not submit to those powers which threatened to rob you of your very self, your inner freedom, which determined whether or not you would become the plaything of circumstance, renouncing freedom and dignity to become molded into the form of a typical inmate. Seen from this point of view, the mental reactions of inmates of a concentration camp must seem more to us than mere expression of certain physical and sociological conditions. Even though conditions such as lack of sleep, insufficient food, and various mental stresses may suggest that the inmates were bound to react in certain ways, in the final analysis, it becomes clear that the sort of person the prisoner became was the result of an inner decision and not the result of camp influences alone. Fundamentally, therefore, any man can, even under such circumstances, decide what shall become of him mentally and spiritually. And if you've tuned out, hear this last line. He may retain his human dignity even in a concentration camp. These are powerful words for a man who had to journey through this, reflect on this, and endure this. And I want you to know, I don't share that moment to compare where you are to where Viktor Frankl was in a concentration camp. I don't share that moment to go, maybe you're not journeying through this very well right now, and what you really need is to feel the guilt and weight of how you ought to be doing this because of, somebody's had this worse than you or whatever it is at some point in time. I don't do it for any of those reasons. The reason I share this is that we might glean this powerful wisdom and insight that came through a man who journeyed through a very difficult time, as we in our own right are facing a very different difficult time. That wisdom is there for us even still. Friends, this week, there's gonna be voices around you, and there's gonna be voices within you that rise up and seek to take hold of your heart and mind and leave you running off into the darkness towards whatever ledge it is that's in front of you. Leave you with fear and anxiety, hostility and resentment. And yet there remains a kind of human dignity and love to walk in even still, even here, even now. If you tune your ears and your heart to the voice of Christ that's in you, that's there, that's always there speaking to you, and if you let God meet you exactly where you are, then in that moment there remains a decision yet to be made. Which voice will you follow? Will you stand in the love of the Good Shepherd? Will you take a step even now towards the life that even amidst these difficult circumstances that Christ has for you here, now, as we journey through this difficult time? The truth is there will undoubtedly be hardships and uncertainty this next week. There's going to be. It's an honest part of this season that we each find ourselves in. It is. We need to be honest and real about all of that. But amidst all of that, amidst the unknowns, amidst the uncertainty, there's also going to be moments to love others really well. There's also going to be moments where even if the only way that you can communicate is electronically, to see someone, to reach somebody, to love them right where they are. There's going to be moments to love yourself this week, the way that Christ loves you already, that you might find moments to be kind to yourself and allow yourself the grace of God as you walk through all the complexity that's in front of you. And there's going to be people in your home and people around you who themselves are journeying through this, searching for meaning and searching to figure out what their next steps look like or what small moments they have. And you can meet them even in that, in hopes that they also will meet you. We're in this together, friends. Amidst the sea of circumstances and unknowns that surrounds each of us right now, Christ, the Good Shepherd, remains constant and unchanging, and his love is a firm foundation that we can build our lives upon even still. For you, for me, for each of us today, the Good Shepherd speaks, even still. Let's pray. God, I just pray for each and every person that is engaged with this right now, Lord, that they would hear your voice. That voice of love and of kindness, that voice of warmth and compassion, that grace that showers over them, that they would know that they would experience that. Not that all of their complexity and all of their circumstance would suddenly go away, but that you would meet us square in the midst of it, God. And so I pray for that. Help us to attune our ears to hear that. Help us to attune our lives to stand in that. And may it be a great source of comfort as we walk forward this week. If there are those feeling pressure and shame about whatever they might be facing, I pray that be lifted, that they might know your love, compassion, and grace. If there are those who are weary, I pray for strength. And if there are those who are struggling, I pray for wisdom. God, we love you. We trust you. Thank you for allowing us all to be together. In your name, amen.
Hey, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Look, before you sign off, we just wanted to encourage you. Find a place to be honest this week. Maybe that looks like introspection for yourself. Maybe that looks like just taking a minute and thinking through how this is actually affecting you. I've been so busy, I haven't done that yet until this week. And I was driving with my kids, and I finally was like, why am I grinding my teeth all the time? Why am I waking up feeling like disarray? There's no one in my life that's sick. My kids are healthy. I get to see them more. I still have a job. Those are all things to be blessed by. And so I really hadn't taken the time to think, like, what is this doing in me? And so we want to encourage you this week. Find somebody to be honest with. Find somebody that you can process with. Maybe you are stressed out. Maybe you are sitting in the unknown and you don't like that. And maybe you're okay. And maybe that's okay. So this week, we want you to just take a minute, find somebody that you can be honest with, and open up to one another. We have a ton of Facebook groups that you can hop on. We hope that you will do that. Join a community. Look to connect with somebody, even if you're just reading the posts or watching previous posts or whatever it might be. Something to connect with other people is a healthy, healthy thing right now. And if you're not into social media, which I totally get, then email us at info@casaschurch.org. info@casaschurch.org, and we would love to get you connected. We have lots of Zoom groups that are meeting right now and lots of other ways that you can stay a part of a community, a part of this community. We love you guys. Peace and joy to you.
No, I don't know where this world is headed or where it may end, but you gave